clear of the closing doors, please.
Welcome to Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into SST on Apple Podcast app, Spotify, and on YouTube. Joining me today, a Subway Sports Talk newcomer. Excited to have this guy on the show. We met, who knows, 8-10 months ago, perhaps, at WFAN, but he does so many things, including a great Knicks podcast we will dabble in a little bit later. We'll talk about later, as well as working at the Fan, CBS Sports Radio, and so much more. EJ Stewart in the building. What's up, man?
PK, thank you so much for having me, man. Really appreciate it. It's going to be a fun discussion, fun podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm honored and I'm excited because there's a lot of stuff from working with you at the Fan that I heard you get your takes off, and I was like, this guy's got something. He's got something to say. He's got good rhythm, good flow, and also you're a Marvel fan. Also, you love hoops like I do. Like, it was just when I was working, producing your shift, I'm like, He asked me to play hip-hop. I love hip-hop. I'm like, this is like a match made in heaven right now. So I'm excited we're actually connecting. And just to give a quick roundabout of what we're planning to do here, we're going to hit the Giants. We're going to hit the Jets because it's basically football season, EJ. I don't know if you're feeling that juice right now. Like, is it football season?
Oh, after watching Hard Knocks last night and seeing how this Yankee and Mets season has deteriorated, I've just said, yep, we're in football season. Baseball season has ended. I know there are games being played, but I'm past that at this point. We're all in on pigskin at this point.
Yeah, and I confirm that you and I are both Mets fans, which means even more so that it's football season.
Oh.
Yankees fans might think it's still baseball season, but a lot of them don't want it to be. They're kind of in this weird limbo. But we're not going to talk baseball today unless it comes up organically. We're talking Giants and Jets. I have an NFL at large topic I can't wait to get to about some hot division races that look maybe like there's a big-time favorite, but there could be some underlying competitors in there. We'll talk about that. We'll hop to one hypothetical for the New York Knicks that I want to get to, and I did mention specifically EJ Stewart, along with Tommy Beer. You may know him from Twitter, hosts of the Orange and Blue Blood podcast through Odyssey. Wonderful stuff, talking Knicks all year long. You just recorded one before this, double duty.
You literally just recorded one. It should be out in the morning by the time this is out as well. So you're talking about Josh Hart extension. So make sure you guys check that out wherever you get your podcasts.
Now give me the 2-second lowdown here because I saw a notification it was done, and then I saw a notification that it can't be done. What happened? What happened with this?
So essentially, it's more of like there's a date. I think today is technically the date, but there's a date where like you have to officially be able to say, okay, after you picked up your option, you have to this date to sign your extension. So they're ironing out the final details. It should get done in the next day or so. But yeah, essentially they're just filing out the details of that agreement, an $81 million contract for Josh Hart over 4 years.
A guy who just does the things that we love on the basketball court and changed the culture around this team a little bit last year. So I'm excited to have him. But, he also ain't everything. So it's one of those situations where when you pay him, you're happy to do so, but a little party is like, is there somewhere where the grass is greener? Perhaps we'll talk about that in our Knicks hypothetical later on. Then we're going to talk a little bit of radio life, a little bit of EJ's background, getting into audio and all this different stuff that you and I both obviously have a passion for. And last but not least, if you are a Marvel fan, you got to stick around because I saw EJ tweet something out at the Secret Invasion finale that I saw, and I was like, damn. And I tweeted you back, and I'm like, I didn't watch it yet, but I'm not happy now. And I was hoping that you were being a hater, and I don't think you were. I hope that's not a spoiler, but we're going to talk Marvel at the very, very end as well. So, EJ, let's get into football talk here. Let's start off with your New York Jets. They're hot on the streets. Like you said, Hard Knocks is here. I did not watch the first episode yet. I hope to do so later on this evening. But the hype is super real. Now, you, in my opinion, pretty rational person. However, it's pretty easy to get caught up in some of the snafus and the hype and the Aaron Rodgers of it all and the talent, the defense, yada, yada, yada. So from where you were when Aaron Rodgers was officially announced, not the wingo, the official announcement of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, to now, have you changed? Have you talked yourself into or out of anything with the Jets? And then we can get into some more specifics. But where were you at when Rodgers signed officially? And where are you at now entering Hard Knocks and training camp?
Yeah, I mean, it may sound mundane, but when he signed, I said, okay, the Jets can make a playoff run. And now that he's here, I think, okay, the Jets can make a playoff run. Like, to me, it's not about Super Bowl or bust as it is for other a lot of other Jet fans, a lot of Jet fans that have been longing for it, and I get it. This is, talking about 50 years pretty much since you've last won a Super Bowl, and you sit there and you say, at what point are we finally going to get over the hump? And to me, the way I look at the situation, oftentimes it's very rare you see a team go from essentially, broke to being a millionaire. And that's what the Jets were. They were broke. They had no quarterback, haven't made the playoffs in 12 years. To think that you're going to go from that to say, okay, now we're a Super Bowl team, it seems a little far-fetched. Now, I'm excited about Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson's a dog. I really like this kid Rucker, the tight end that didn't play much last year, the kid from Ohio State. I think that he's going to be a factor. Breece Hall's got to get healthy, but he looked like he was going to have a spectacular rookie season. The defense is solid. Quinnen Williams, great player. Sauce Gardner's a stud. But to me, the Jets still had issues that didn't quite get fixed. I mean, the offensive line, they kind of didn't do anything. It was just, all right, AVT's back, so we're going to just hope that Dwayne Brown stays up, or maybe Mekhi Becton finds a way to stay in shape and get right, and just hope we're okay, like as if that wasn't an issue last season. The safety situation, they lost Chuck Clark before things even began, so I'm not as thrilled about the safeties. I'm not as excited about the linebackers. I think C.J. Mosley's been a little overrated over the past several years as a Jet, so it's not necessarily a team I don't look at them like I look at the Bengals, or I look at the Chiefs where I say that is a juggernaut. That is an absolute, just beast in the AFC. Now, what gives me excitement, though, I'm not pessimistic, is I think in the NFL, you just get in the playoffs and everybody's got a shot. It's a one-game elimination. We've seen the Giants. We've seen the Ravens. We've seen so many teams kind of have these kind of unpredictable kind of runs that you wouldn't have expected. Jets can absolutely get to that, but you have to get to the playoffs to get there. And I think with Aaron Rodgers, they have an absolute solid chance to do that. Like I think that the Bengals and Chiefs are probably 1 and 2. Then I think there are a lot of good AFC teams. The Jets being a part of that mix is why I'm excited.
And the AFC part of it all is obviously a huge thing. AFC is stacked. Your own division, the AFC East, is stacked from top to bottom. Like, people want to poo-poo the Patriots a little bit because of how boring they were last year, basically, but they were pretty much the same as the Jets last year, right? Like, they had one more win. They actually scored more points, even with how boring their freaking offense was. Yes, the Jets' defense was probably a little bit better, but we're not talking about the Patriots being, one of the worst teams in the league. That's not going to happen, right? So there's no gimmies in your division. The Dolphins are obviously good. The Bills are obviously good. The schedule's going to be hard. I said this a few weeks back. If you look at the Jets and Giants, just because we're here in New York, it's obvious the Jets are a better team. However, it's not as straightforward to say that the Jets will have a better season than the Giants just based off simply being in the AFC versus the NFC. Jets have a very difficult schedule. The Giants don't have an easy schedule, but it's easier than the Jets, and their competition for those wild card spots is just not the same. Like, we're going to talk about this more later, an AFC North that has 4 teams that think they're making the playoffs this year. Yeah. We're talking about an AFC East that thinks they have 4 teams that want to make the playoffs this year. It's not going to be that easy, but you do have this one thing that you can rely on, which is a defense. And I'm not going to compare to Tom Brady and the Bucs that won a Super Bowl in their first year together, but you bring in a Hall of Fame quarterback with some offensive weapons and an elite defense. Maybe it doesn't mean Super Bowl, but there's a recipe there that should make Jets fans feel confident. So to those Jets fans who are being pessimistic, which they're not really too loud right now, but they're there, do they have any real thing to hold on to other than, we're the Jets, we're on Hard Knocks, it's bad luck, it's just gonna be bad? Like, that to me is the worst argument, but is that the only thing they have right now based off of what this roster looks like and how this defense performed last year?
I mean, to some degree, yes, and that's one of the things I hate, and I've talked about it on the fan. Like, the one thing I can't do, and maybe it's because I'm a Jets fan, a Knicks fan, and a Mets fan, so I deal threefold. I deal with my franchise is cursed, my franchise will never win, and I'm like, that's not an analysis, that's not anything. So I can't even have conversations with those kind of people. But I do think when you look at this Jets team, in some ways, yes, you're looking at saying, look, like, this is a team that just hasn't been able to get out of their way, so why do you think they will now? But like I mentioned before, I think if there was anything I would really pay attention to, it would be the line. Because, you're talking about Aaron Rodgers turning 40, and you got to keep him upright. Now, he has always been great at evading the rush and evading pass rushers. That's always been one of his top attributes. But he's slowed down as time's gone on, and we've seen in the last few years he has gotten injured. So keeping him healthy is going to be super important. And say what you want about Zach Wilson, and I would tell you a ton. He was awful, but he did not get any help from his offensive line for a majority of his 2 years as a starter. So that would concern me. As I mentioned before, the play in the middle, again, not necessarily in the line, but I think the linebackers and the safeties particularly, like those guys are going to have to play a lot better than they did last year at points as well. Because you can't just rely on your corners to do everything. Like, you're going to have these guys playing in space, whether it be tight ends, running backs out of the backfield. That is, I think, been the weak point of the Jets defense if there's been one. So those would be the two things I would point to and say if there's something that goes wrong, maybe it's those positions that don't play up to snuff.
I heard Ndamukong Suh in an interview maybe last week talking about the quarterbacks that he played against that were the best. And he actually specifically said, I don't want to say this because I don't like him, but Aaron Rodgers. That's who he said first as number one. And part of the reason why he brought up him, Brady, and Manning, who he got a couple times early in his career, he said those quarterbacks can take us out. And he's talking about defensive linemen. He's like, they can take us out of the game. And maybe that's a recipe for success with this line maybe not being great and relying on Mekhi Becton, who has been unreliable since he joined the league, despite a couple flashes here and there. So that's kind of a saving grace. However, the question mark that isn't a question mark of talent, because the receivers are good. It's a question mark of chemistry. Something that gets brought up about Aaron Rodgers all the time. He can't get along with young receivers. It took him until week 12 last year to get on the same page as Dobbs and Watson. Looking at Garrett Wilson, obviously a stud. Horrible quarterback play last year, rookie of the year. Impressive, undoubtable. Lazard, Cobb, we know the story. Corey Davis, they're all still here. Conklin, Uzomah, you like Rucker.
Yeah.
The connection for Rodgers, these receivers, specifically Wilson a little bit too. Problem to you? Positive to you? Somewhere in the middle.
I think him and Wilson are going to be great. I think that if there's anything that I feel most excited about or most secure about is that Garrett Wilson probably puts up 1,400 yards, makes a Pro Bowl, and as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy, that he has a successful season in that regard. I'm not too concerned about that. I do think there could be concerns about some of the other guys in terms of kind of how they divvy this thing up, because you have one guy we didn't mention him, Mecole Hardman, a guy who they signed who's a Blazer, but he's unlike really any of the other receivers that they have. They have some redundancy, in my opinion, with some of these receivers. Like Corey Davis and Lazard, to me, are extremely similar. You're talking about big, physical receivers, not necessarily your quick slot guys. Those are guys who play a lot on the outside. One of them has got to play in the slot, unless they're going to play Garrett Wilson way more in the slot than we expect.
Which could be good.
Yeah, which may be great. I mean, he has the body type to be a killer, but that's not necessarily something he did last season, and it's not what he was drafted to be. So that would be a change for him. So I wonder if maybe there's some fat that gets trimmed, and that one of these guys ends up getting traded early in the season, or one of these guys just isn't playing as much as we think. Like, I think it's going to be some combination of Wilson, Hardman, and then one of those big guys, probably Lazard, honestly. I think Davis is probably the guy that maybe becomes the odd man out. But it's a little concerning. I think that, like, one thing that I think Jet fans need to hold on to, and every time I see Jet fans get a little annoyed, especially on Twitter, where everybody's annoyed, but nonetheless, Aaron Rodgers didn't play well last year. And I watched a lot of those Packers games. Like, my brother's a Packers fan, so I followed them very closely. Like, Aaron Rodgers, his deep ball accuracy was terrible. He just wasn't sharp. And a lot of stuff in Green Bay they didn't think that he was locked in, which is why I'm not as concerned, because I think that he looks like he's locked in now. I'm not concerned about how focused he is. But, like, he has to play better. Like, to think that, we could take the Aaron Rodgers from last year and the Jets are going to go to the Super Bowl, that's insane. That Aaron Rodgers is not a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. But if you're getting the guy from 2 years ago, the MVP, the guy that was dominating the NFC, if you get that guy and you put him on this Jets team, now you're saying, okay, this is a team that can go very far. But Aaron Rodgers has to play better, regardless of who his receivers are. He didn't play up to snuff last year.
And two feathers in his cap in that regard. One, he did lead the league in dropped passes last year. There's 40 dropped passes by Packers receivers last year. So obviously that hurts the overall numbers and certain games, right? Just momentum and et cetera. He was still on target, technically, top 2 in the league with 80% on target. Like, those numbers for Rodgers are basically always going to be great. He almost chooses when to not be on target, like on purpose. He knows he doesn't have a safe throw. Let's put it where either I got it or no one's got it. He does that type of stuff. He's that good. So maybe that's a feather in his cap. And I think the other one, like you said about Garrett Wilson, guaranteed 1,400. Christian Watson's very good. Extremely talented, very good to good. Romeo Doubs, extremely talented. He's good. Garrett Wilson is not just very good. He might be an elite wide receiver. Like, there's a difference between an extreme talent trying to connect with an older quarterback and like a top 5 young wide receiver talent in the game level player like Garrett Wilson. So I do think, I agree with you, that should not be an issue. We're not talking about a raw athletic receiver who can make plays. We're talking about a put together guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything as a wide receiver right now. So to me, those are all positives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Wilson, and when you compare him to Dobbs and the Watson, I mean, those guys are second round pick, fourth round pick, smaller schools. I mean, this guy played at Ohio State. This guy put up, 1,400 yards playing at Ohio State, playing in big games. This guy was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Like, this is not like some guy that they're saying, oh, he has potential. Like, this is a guy who's been a blue chip player pretty much since he stepped on a football field. So you give that kind of player a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, and we saw what he did last year with the lack of quarterback play. There's no reason to believe why Garrett Wilson won't have a monster season this year.
Yeah, I actually completely agree, and I just want to do a quick little prediction. I don't know how you are on prediction front when it comes to football, but just simple stuff. Right now, minus 134 to make the playoffs, plus 110 to make the playoffs, and their over-under is 9.5. Do you have a favorable play, or you think those are properly priced, perhaps?
I think over on the wins is probably solid. I like if they had 9 wins, that's a disaster. Like, that's not what I think anybody would hope for or expect. To me, if that happens, that's because there were massive injuries and they just never got out of the starting blocks, whether it be to the line. And obviously if Rodgers or someone gets hurt like that, that's going to change everything. But even some of those fringe players or fringe positions, we say, hey, the line never came together, or one of the corners went down. Like, that would maybe how you get to that. But as long as the Jets are relatively upright, I say 10 is a minimum. 10-7, I would be surprised by it, even with the tough schedule, because it isn't easy.
Yeah, and the first 6 weeks are just gnarly as well.
Yeah.
Right up to their bye. It's the Chiefs. It's the Bills. It's everybody who's good. Right. Like
the one game that like people thought was like, oh, we can kind of relax is this Bronco game that now may be the most anticipated game of that first stretch. Right. What happened with Sean Payton.
Right, and their defense was good last year. Like, for as horrendous as Russell Wilson was last year, and that offense was so tough to watch, their defense kind of stood on its head over and over again, and like covered spreads, kept games close for no reason, like a bunch of ugly, stupid games to watch, but their defense played good, right? So there's a chance the Broncos are competitive, and the Patriots is technically the second easiest game on the first 6 weeks of the Jets, and that's not an easy game either. And then you get a bye and you play the Giants. So no rest for the Jets, even through that first bye. One guy we did not mention real quick before we go to the Giants.
Yeah.
We didn't talk Breece Hall, EJ. So Breece Hall absolutely lit the world on fire last year for a few weeks. Went down with the injury. Expected to be back by week 1, but they're kind of taking their time. Dalvin Cook is hanging in the winds right now about if he's going to be a Jet or not. What's the thoughts by you on the running back situation in Breece Hall?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my expectations for Breece have probably been lower than most. The ACL injury happening kind of early-ish in the season, but not necessarily before the season, makes me feel like Breece may be a player you're really looking to hit stride, maybe kind of for like the playoff push. You're talking about maybe November, maybe December, where he'll probably be available before then, but when he really starts to hit his stride and really start to look like the Breece Hall of old, that's probably what you're looking at. So I think the Jets early on may end up being more of a passing team if someone like Dalvin Cook isn't here, which we really have no idea. It's one of the weirdest free agent things. I mean, well, Odell Beckham last year was the weirdest free agent thing I've ever seen, and he didn't sign with anybody. That was the weirdest thing. But this Dalvin Cook thing is pretty close too, where like his training camp's happening, teams are getting ready for a season. You would think he'd have to learn a playbook because he's going to be on a new team, and he's just chilling. And my theory is that I think he really badly wants to go to the Dolphins. He's from South Florida. I love the Miami Hurricanes, so I remember him coming up out of high school, and he went to Florida State, so he's very much tied to that area. So he wants to be, I think, in Miami. I don't think Miami really wants him, so that's, I think, where this kind of game of chickens happening where I think they say, hey, if you come here for nothing, we'll take you. But otherwise, I don't know. Jets, I think, won them because I think they feel like those early season moments with Breece Hall, he may not be the player that he was last season, but I'm not too concerned long term for him. Breece, I love when the Jets drafted him. He's one of my favorite players coming out of that draft, and he came out and was absolute dog to start the season. So as soon as he can get healthy and get 100% right, this Jet team, I think, in terms of hitting their stride and making a real run, they're going to need Breece Hall to be a big part of that.
I think some of these older players like Dalvin Cook and Zeke Elliott, Dominican Sue, to bring him back up again, they're vets. They've been around the block. They've been through training camps. They're not rushing. They're not rushing to get to practice and start grinding. Like, they're probably staying in shape. They're probably doing what they have to do. They're confident they can learn a playbook. And I think that they're just going to say, oh, all right, we're 2 weeks out now. All right, let's get serious about this, right? Like, I think that's kind of what's happening, and I don't blame them. Like, I don't blame them. That grind, especially when you're in year 5, 6, 7, 8. I think Sue might be in year like 13, but D-line's different beast than running back or something like that. But if I'm Dalvin Cook and Zeke Elliott, I'm waiting until there's 2 weeks left and say, who wants me? What's up? What's good?
You couldn't pay me to get on an NFL field. So talk about doing training camp in the NFL after having been through it for how many years? Zeke or Dalvin Cook have been in it. Yeah, I would be like, no, I'll be good. Tell me when the real game starts. Yeah,
point me where to block. I got you, and then tell me which hole to hit, and I'll hit the right one. All right. There's the Jet stuff. I guess I'll throw my prediction just for the fun of it here. I also like the over 9.5, and I kind of hate saying it. The only way 9 could be okay is if the AFC absolutely annihilates itself, right? Like even though there's so many good teams in the AFC, they could beat up each other a lot, and 9 could, with tiebreakers, get you into the playoffs. It's possible. It's probably unlikely, but it is possible. But I do think the Jets get to 10. The only problem is 10 going to be enough in the AFC? I do think they get there. Minus 134, probably properly priced on the playoffs, especially with all the buzz going on with the Jets. All right, let's move on to the New York Giants. This is EJ Stewart, EJ_Stewart on the Twitter.
Yep.
Orange Blue Blood Podcast, Knicks Podcast. Check that thing out, too. Let's talk Giants. They're over-under. Not as impressive, if you will. It is at 7.5, EJ. And there is hype as well. Maybe it's more localized hype for Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. And you and I, obviously, being in New York, we feel that a little bit more. And I always try to remind myself, like, what are people in New York saying? What are people around the country saying? Because there's a difference, right? When as Knicks fans, we know this better than anybody. When we're thinking about the Knicks, like, nah, Frank Ntilikina really got something, and then the rest of the league is like, no, he doesn't, right?
Alonzo Trier, Chris Copeland. There's a long list of guys that like just never became anything that Knicks fans swore would be linchpin NBA players here.
I have ripped Chris Copeland twice on a Knicks Pacers square on like Hoops Grid and the Immaculate Grid, and I was like, hell yeah, Chris Copeland doing something positive for me there. But about the Giants, I do like to think about both sides of it because I think a lot of New Yorkers got the blinders on, and then there's a lot of New Yorkers, as we both know, who think Daniel Jones sucks and this team's not very good. So you get both sides here in New York. Where do you land on the Giants? But before you get to specifically right now, I do kind of want to hear your Daniel Jones arc, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to go back to when he was drafted if you want to, go ahead. Right. But maybe to like 1 year ago versus the end of last year versus now, where's EJ feeling on that arc of Daniel Jones' career?
Well, I'll say this. Daniel Jones, the year prior to, I guess, last season, I was a little, I won't say I was stunned they brought him back. Not in the sense that I don't think that he was in their long-term plans. But I think for them, in a year where they looked at potential franchise quarterbacks being available, they said, hey, might not be that great a team. I feel like Joe Shane he made a weird comment about saying, hey, it may take time here. Like, it was very interesting how this whole thing switched given how good the team became. But I think they kind of kept him there as a bridge quarterback waiting to take the next guy. And that's kind of how I saw him. I seen enough of Daniel Jones. I saw the turnovers. I saw the inconsistent play. I saw, to me, what were very average traits. Average arm, average accuracy. I realized I was wrong about his athleticism. He's an above average athlete for sure. But he really didn't flash that before last season. So my thing was like, this, you're never going to win with this guy. So there are a lot of other issues, but to keep this guy around was, I thought, a mistake. Turned out to not necessarily be a mistake, I think. And I say I think with that kind of question mark because he played great last season. Nobody can deny that. He was maybe the most important Giant. I know some people would say Saquon, but like I think they're kind of two hands in the same bush, so to speak. If that's even a euphemism, I might make one up. But anyway, yeah.
You got to be careful with that, though.
Yeah, they're a yin and yang. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. What kind of bush are you talking about, right? But you know what I'm saying? But like they're a yin and yang, and I think that they both were super important to the Giants' offense. My question would be, what is this guy's ceiling? Because to me, I think in the NFL, coaching means more than any other pro sport. Like I think in basketball, it means a lot more than people think, but it's not as much as football. In baseball, it means very little, I think. Hockey, it means some. I'd probably put it somewhere between basketball and baseball. But, like, it's football, like, the coach means everything. And what we learned is that the Giants already had a bozo. Well, we didn't learn that. I knew that. They had a bozo before in Joe Judge. And then they got a guy who ended up being a stud as a coach in Dayball. So, my question would be, okay, he did what he did last year, and I think nobody can question he's a starting quarterback, but can you ever really win with this guy? I thought the Philly game kind of showed you what happens when, you know, he has to play against the real killers. You know what I'm saying? Like, Minnesota had a great season. They were a good team, but their defense had a lot of issues. The secondary was old. They lacked speed, and Dayball had a great game plan. Jones had the greatest game of his career. But you're just not going to be beating the Minnesota Vikings of the world to win a Super Bowl. And the Giants now stay in this middle game now where you're like, all right, maybe you're good enough to make the playoffs. Maybe you're good enough to win 9 to 10 games every year. But where are you actually going? And to me, locking into Daniel Jones, the contract isn't as bad as people think. But, like, he's the guy now for the next 3 years. Do I think that the Giants are going to win anything significant with him as their quarterback for 3 years? No. So that's why I say, was it good that he played so great? I mean, it was a fun season, so I'm not going to say it was bad, but if you had Super Bowl aspirations, I don't think that they exist as long as he's your starter.
As a Giants fan, I unfortunately agree that I don't think a Super Bowl is in our future unless
Hate to be the bearer of bad news, man. I'm sorry.
No, listen, I'm right here with you, and I'm caught in the middle because I'm in this group text with a mutual friend of ours, Pat Boyle.
Hey, Patty B.
Yeah, me, Patty B, and one of his friends from home, a guy we know from college. We're in this group chat talking sports like all the time. They're actually on this podcast every once in a while as well. One of these dudes absolutely hates Daniel Jones so much that we had to strip. We literally stripped his Giant fandom. He's a Giants fan,
wow.
Allegedly a Giants fan, and he hates him so much, says he's so bad, and like he's a little too Skip Bayless-y. To the point where he'll actually send Skip Bayless tweets to, like, confirm his takes. And we're like, no, that doesn't help you, man. That makes it worse, but he doesn't see it, and it's okay. And I throw shade at him on this podcast all the time, so I don't feel that bad. But those people definitely exist. And then there's other people who see Greg Jennings put Daniel Jones at number 9 on his top quarterback list. And, like, look, I told you, Greg Jennings, he's been in the league. He's played with great quarterback. Like, he knows, and Daniel Jones is a top 10 guy. And I'm like, all right, I can't do that either, though, right? It is clearly somewhere in the middle where he's now maybe closer to 10 than 20, but he's not a top 10 guy yet. Like, we're not there yet, and I don't know what it's going to take for him to get there. You can make the excuses about the lackluster receivers, which is still kind of a fact. Darren Waller obviously being a positive addition as long as he stays healthy. Saquon being back, obviously positive. Daboll, like you said, not having Jason Garrett is a huge win in and of itself. But this team now, in my opinion, is more of a can they have competitive, fun seasons and make playoffs? That's unfortunately the peak goal to me. And that's not great to say as a fan, but at least I'm going to watch the Giants and think they have a chance every week. For a long time, that was not the case. And them scoring 21 points was like, oh my God. Like, there were points last year, I'm like, oh my God, the Giants scored in the 20s, like, multiple weeks in a row. This is so weird. I'm not used to this, right? Yeah. So the Daniel Jones thing is weird. He's got to throw more touchdowns. Like, 2 years ago, I was saying, yeah, everyone's telling me how fast he is and how he can run. He doesn't score any touchdowns on the ground. Last year, he added that. He hasn't thrown nearly as many touchdowns in a year since his rookie season. So if he can get to 25 and still run for 7, we're talking about something here. We got something. And the contract is a lot more reasonable, so there is something there. But with that all being said, there are still so many question marks on this team. The linebackers were bad last year. The offensive line got better, but still wasn't great. Now they're expecting it to be a little bit better here. The receivers is still bottom third in the league. So even with the excitement, even with their ability to get to 8 or 9 wins again, possibly, that's the ceiling, and that's kind of what makes the Giants just less interesting than the Jets at this point, because their ceiling is a playoff berth and 1 win. Like that's their ceiling.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think when you look at these teams, you say every year there are teams who made the playoffs, went on deep runs, sometimes won 12, 13 games, that all of a sudden just crater. And if I'm looking for targets to say, okay, what teams from last season, from the whole league, that we say, hey, who are these teams that will then hit that crater? Giants are our top target for me, because so much of last season, having a rookie coach comes with a lot of downsides, but there comes a lot of benefits, because you don't know what this guy's going to do. Like, Daboll comes with a playbook, but he can, in theory, throw out the Buffalo playbook. He can do whatever he wants now that he's a head coach. And he wasn't calling the plays. Kafka was calling plays. So that added another wrinkle to it. So offensively, you didn't know what the Giants were going to be last season. I think the way they played surprised people. Like, now you have a whole season of film watching what they did. And I think while what they did in Minnesota was great, I think that Eagles game, again, showed that some of that stuff was smoke and mirrors. Like, there's that Jadakiss line, you only gangster when lions are in the cage. Like, they didn't have to see the Eagles in that kind of team until the divisional round. And then all of a sudden, that Giant offense that looked unbelievable the week before and then looked great for majority of that season, you couldn't out-scheme the kind of talent disparity that there was. And I think that some of these close wins they had last season, they had a nail-biter to start the year against Tennessee, nail-biter against the Packers. Like, some of those games, you can win a game on just, like, the coach making the right call here, or making a tweak here, or them not expecting this thing here. Like, it's a game of inches. That may swing the other way completely when you have teams that with a little more familiarity about what the Giants are trying to accomplish offensively. Adding a guy like Waller, adding a Paris Campbell, a speed guy, like, that does add some wrinkles, so maybe like that will help. But that would be my concern is, look, you came in last season, nobody knew what to expect. You shocked the entire league. Okay, what happens now when we have a whole year of tape of what you like to do? Can you still go out there and do it? The best teams can find a way to do what they want to do and impose their will regardless of what the other team is doing. Are the Giants that kind of team? I don't think so. So that would concern me a great deal about how the Giants can replicate last season's success.
Yeah, and if last year the receivers were the 28th ranked receiver group in the league, like, they might actually be like 20th now, 22nd
right,
maybe,
yeah.
Maybe, right? But you're looking at Paris Campbell, who's a pro. He's a legitimate professional wide receiver. I think we can probably say the same thing about Hodgins. And the wrinkle that didn't get brought up yet is Jalen Hyatt. Like, if Hyatt can be one of those rookies that just shows up and is putting up 90 yards a game, completely different dynamic of this offense. So I'm excited to see Hyatt. The speed is just nuts what he's doing right now. But the big question mark and the big hype around the Giants is Darren Waller. So EJ, I don't know, are you a big fantasy guy or no?
Yeah. I'm a commissioner of my league, so
hell yeah. So I'm gonna bring fantasy to reality for a second, because this is the perfect chance to ask a fantasy question, but it actually has real implications to the Giants season. You staying away from Darren Waller, or are you going all in on Darren Waller? Like, you going to do a slight reach for him in the draft, or are you going to only pick him if he's late with value, which probably won't happen with the hype that's going on right now?
Yeah, I would be scared of Waller because of the injuries. Like, he's not an old player, but he's a little bit beyond the years where he was a star. Now, the only reason why he hasn't been able to put those same numbers up is because he hasn't been available. Now, do I think that he can just show up in New York and those injuries problems go away? Maybe. Like, I remember, it's funny saying on the fantasy line, I took a flyer on Brandon Marshall when he came to the Jets. I don't know. I just felt like he was going to do really well here. I forgot. He reminded me of some. I had this whole thing. I was like, Brandon Marshall's going to be like some other player that did the same thing, where, like, everybody thought he was done and then has this great season, and Brandon Marshall was great. So there's definitely a scenario where Waller does great. I would be wary though, because of the injury history.
Yeah, and obviously we didn't go deep into the how do you value tight ends and drafts
That's
and yada
another
yada.
thing too. Yeah.
Because if you want a good one, I mean, he's one of the 5 good ones, right? Like
Yeah.
he is until he's not, and then he's
Right.
not, and then you're playing Bellinger and. Who knows what you can pick off the scrap heap on the tight end waiver wire. That gets a little
Yeah.
a little bit frisky sometimes. All right, let's wrap up the Giants. We'll get to some other stuff here. 7.5 over under. EJ, how you feeling on that number?
I would go under. I mean, that's a tough number though. I think that like they live in the 6 to I think 9 is like the high mark. I don't think they get to double digits this year. Like I think 9 is probably the high number. Like that's where they live. So it's like it's one of the things where like to me it's how much you believe that Dayball with Waller with Campbell and the defense. Another thing too is the defense has got to stay healthy as well. Like they drafted Banks as a corner. They had no depth at corner when Jackson went out. It was like they couldn't cover anybody. McKinney's got healthy as a safety. Like, do they have enough now to kind of withstand the injuries and things that kind of happened during the NFL season? It's a big question mark. I just think teams kind of having a better familiarity with the Giants. I think they come back to earth a little bit. I think I would put them at 7 wins. So that would put me at under, but it's going to be close. That's not a bet I would touch. I would say that I would not touch that over and under.
I feel you. It's a stay away because unless you're just a fan throwing out $50 for funsies, $25 for funsies, like it is what it is. 8 feels like a solid number for them, but 9 does feel like the ceiling, unfortunately. Yeah. And last thing on my take here, I often say in Daboll we trust, right? In Brian Daboll we trust. He did all the right things last year, except for one little thing that stood out to me. Early in the year, I really felt like he was coaching with house money. He was like, this team's got no expectations. We're playing hard. We're playing the right brand of football. Let's take risks. Let's take chances. Let's go on 4th down. Let's go for wins instead of ties, etc. And later in the year, now that there was some expectations, some pressure, some playoff hopes, I thought there was like a 15 to 20% pullback on that aggressive nature. So I'm very interested to see if that aggressive nature stays true this season and if he doesn't start to kind of pull it back a little bit to play it safe when he starts seeing possibilities of playoffs. Because that's one thing in Daboll that maybe I have a question mark on based off what I saw last year. Because other than that, I mean, it was fantastic. But yeah, let's move on. I have a couple things to go through here with some divisional conversations. This is NFL at large. There's a couple divisions, EJ. 2 of them happen to be the ones we just talked about, the AFC East and the NFC East. I'm going to throw in the AFC West and the AFC North that have numerous teams that have playoff hopes and aspirations. But there is a big-time favorite there that are looked at as the cream of the crop of the NFL. Those teams include the Buffalo Bills at plus 120 in the AFC East, the Bengals at plus 150 in the North, the Chiefs at minus 180 in the West, which is huge odds on division number, and then the Eagles at minus 115, which I think is sneaky, not as high as you would expect, but that goes into why we're having this conversation. So we just talked about the Giants. Let's keep it on the NFC East. You got the Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders. The Commanders probably don't suck, I think. However, they're not an NFC East contender, probably nor the Giants. So my question to you is, is there a chance the Eagles do not walk away with this division title?
Yeah, so my background on the Eagles quickly is I actually kind of predicted their season last year. Like I had them in the Super Bowl. I had them losing in the Super Bowl, not to the Chiefs, I had them to a whole different team. But I pretty much everything that happened like exactly how I thought. So that was kind of crazy. So I've been very high in the Eagles' talent, but teams that go to the Super Bowl usually tank the next year, and it's just it's so much. It takes so much to get to that level, and then to not come through, and to think that you can just get back on the horse and just do it all over again when you're gonna lose coordinators, which they lost both. You're gonna lose guys to free agency. It's just harder. And we know it's been almost impossible to repeat as a champion, but the champions at least sometimes can most of the time get back to the playoffs. Teams that lose not always, but oftentimes struggle. So yeah, the Eagles not winning the division where the Cowboys are there. I'm not someone who necessarily believes in the Cowboys and in their football integrity, but they're a talented team. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do I believe they have the kind of leaders in the locker room and the coach to think that they can, make a run to the Super Bowl? I'm skeptical, but can they go through a 17-game schedule? Schedule will be slightly easier because they'll have the second place schedule instead of the Eagles' first place schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, you trying to put all your eggs in the Mike McCarthy basket? Perhaps not.
Oh yeah, I saw.
Perhaps not.
I was working with Damon Amendola this week, and he was like, if you for the last 30 years decided I'm gonna bet on the Cowboys not to win a Super Bowl, you would have lost not to make the Super Bowl, you would have lost no money.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like the Cowboys kind of are who they are. So I wouldn't feel great about picking somebody but the Eagles. But with the Cowboys, they have too much talent to ignore them. So yeah, the Eagles definitely could find a way, not find a way to get to winning that division.
It goes right back to that conversation we were having with the Jets before. Like, do you believe in the franchise curses? We're going to talk about some more of those moving forward. The Cowboys have been one of those cursed franchises. However, they have had wonderful regular seasons for the past 10 years or so, right? Some of those Romo years were incredible. Dak's had a bunch of winning years in the regular season. And to boot, there hasn't been a repeat NFC East winner since 2004 when the Eagles did it 3 in a row, 01 to 04, 4 years in a row, whatever it was. So it's likely that it can happen. I actually am a Cowboys believer because of the talent on the roster. Like, you look at the team and you go, oh my God, they have one of the best 3 players on the defensive side of the ball in Micah Parsons. They got an elite level defense with Dan Quinn, a coach that you could put your eggs in his basket a little bit. And then if Dak gets over the turnover problem, you got CeeDee, you got Pollard, you got Gallup, you got Brandon Cooks coming through. You got guys out here in Dallas who are serious high level at their position players. So I trust in their roster. I don't want to put my eggs in Mike McCarthy's basket, but we forget that they won 12 games last year too.
Yeah.
I think people very quickly forgot because of their playoff, same story over and over again. Cowboys blow it in the playoffs. There it is again, right? But they won 12 games last year. The Eagles also had very little pushback last year. I mean, there are numbers about Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith and AJ Brown in the fourth quarter that just don't exist because they didn't have to, right? Like, they were just crushing people, and it went all the way through the playoffs, right? Like, even against the Giants, even the Niners with the quarterback situation was a little bit different, but, like, they did not have their backs against the wall almost at all last year outside of when Jalen Hurts was missing 2 games and towards the end of the year and Minshew was playing. So that little adversity thing, along with the Cowboys roster being so good, I think it's 100% possible. All right, for the AFC, I'm going to leave this one more up to you. I think that with the East and the Bills, the North and the Bengals, the West and the Chiefs, which one of those favorites do you think is least likely to actually win their division?
Oof. I mean, to me, it's got to be the East, I think. I think when you look at the West, you're looking at the Chargers and you're saying, hey, I'm one of those suckers. I think the Chargers was the team I had winning the Super Bowl last year. So I just remember now. So I'm one of those suckers who keeps buying into the Chargers. Like, I'm smart enough not to get onto Cowboys narcotic. But the Chargers narcotic, I'm just high all the time on. So, I can't see them winning the division. The North is going to be, I think, a 2-team race. I don't really buy the Browns. I don't buy the Steelers. So it really depends on how much you really love Lamar and some of the additions at wide receiver that they have. I like Lamar. I'm not as sold on the guys they brought in as receivers that will actually change life for him and stay healthy. So I'm going to say the Bengals hold serve, assuming Burrow doesn't, get hurt again or re-aggravate a calf injury. But yeah, that East is a beast. And it feels like there's something off with the Bills. I mean, we had the whole thing with Stephon Diggs and the coach, and first it wasn't fine. Now it is fine. We don't actually know why he's upset. It just seemed very odd. Maybe it's nothing, but like I even think like Josh Allen spent a lot of time away from like Buffalo, and like he was out in New York City. He's got this very now public relationship with Haley Steinfeld, which good for him. I don't care about that, but
I know.
And shoot, man. But at the same time, it's like this is a guy who talked so much about I'm a small town guy. It's why I love being in Buffalo. I'm a Wyoming kid. This guy, he seemed like being in the spotlight. He seemed kind of like being out here in these streets. So like Something's off with Buffalo this year. So when you see what the Jets have done, and I'm not someone who's like just overlooking Miami. Like Tua Tagovailoa has to stay healthy, and that's a mega if. But if that is possible, when they were healthy with those two speed demons in Hill and Waddle, I mean, you just can't. I mean, the saying is, you can't coach speed. You can't teach that kind of speed. Speed kills. Like all the euphemisms we want to say, like you can't stop that. Like those guys aren't gonna get slower this year. So that kind of speed, defensive improvements. Jalen Ramsey, if he comes back and he's fine, and we'll see. He's got the meniscus injury, but that's a bear. That's a bear of a division for the Bills that have to come back to. The Jets and the Dolphins are like completely different from last season. Those teams gave them problems last year. Dolphins beat them last year. Jets beat them last year. Both of them teams could have beat them twice. Dolphins could have beat them in the playoffs. Jets could have beat them with Mike White getting hurt and Zach Wilson getting in or Flacco, whoever came in relief. Like they almost won that game in the snow in Buffalo. So that would be the division in the AFC for me that I have my eye on.
Where I do agree is that the East is the division that has multiple contenders, right? The Dolphins and Jets are two very suitable contenders. I do think the better contenders are the Chargers and Ravens, right? But that it just leaves a little bit more chance on those on the West and the North because, all of a sudden Ravens get injured again, Lamar misses 5 games, and, we ain't talking about this.
Right.
The Chargers continue to charger, and Staley's on his way out. We ain't talking about this. If the Dolphins mess up or Tua gets hurt, you still got the Jets. If the Jets are a little bit slow to start, you still got the Dolphins, right? So I think on that front, I do agree that the East might be better. But I really want to take that Charger narcotic. I want to be floating high off the Herbert right now.
I'm telling you end up messed up under a bridge somewhere, being like, what the hell happened? That's been me for the last decade.
But are you afraid at all that the year you get off the herb is the year
very much pun intended there.
Very intended. Is the year that they put it together. Because to me, the largest storyline that needs to be considered for the Chargers is that Joe Lombardi is not the offensive coordinator anymore.
Yeah.
If I was a Chargers fan, I'd be done. I'd not be a Chargers fan anymore because of how frustrated I get as somebody who doesn't even frequently bet the Chargers. I don't root for the Chargers, and I watch their offense and go crazy because of the checkdowns, the quick releases for Justin Herbert, the back-to-back runs. Now it's 3rd and 9. Herbert, save us. And he does, right? And now Kellen Moore has led a Cowboys offense to top 5 status, right? So Kellen Moore is the OC in the Chargers locker room now. That could end up being the biggest storyline to me. And the Chiefs, is it crazy to just ask who's catching the passes this year? Right? Juju, I'm not a huge Juju Smith-Schuster fan. He was a solid professional receiver for them last year. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is not a number 1. Sky Moore has some ability. He could be. They're talking a lot about Justin Ross in Kansas City camps right now, but how many receivers have we heard about who are standing out in camp and then are just non-existent in the regular season? Is it stupid for me to just question who's getting 750 yards after Kelsey's 1,500? Is it stupid for me to even ask the question?
I don't think it's stupid to ask. I just think that when you think about the answers are they'll find somebody. Like that just seems to be the answer for the Chiefs. Because look, I was one in terms of my excitement for the Chargers. I looked at Tyreek Hill leaving, saying, "Look, like that's a guy. You lose that kind of guy. You don't just. It's not just okay. Well, next man up, or we'll just be fine, or we can just get guys on the scrap heap for 1 year and they'll figure it out." Like I thought, I was very much a skeptic, and then Pat Mahomes and those guys made me a believer. So. Sky Moore's a guy that everybody's really excited about last year. Really didn't get that much time. Now, year 2, usually for a lot of receivers, year 2 is the year where they really kind of step into their own. There's a lot of excitement for year 1, but playing receiver in the NFL is actually one of the hardest positions to come into in terms of and play right away and be an immediate stud, which is why the receiver class last year was ridiculous. Like the fact that Olave and Graham, obviously, and Garrett Wilson. And Drake London, like that they had the success that they had was like that doesn't happen normally. So maybe more comes in this year, a little more seasoned, not as wet behind the ears, and he's a contributor. But the thing about the Chargers thing, which is interesting, is Herbert really has never been in an offense like this. Because at Oregon, when he was playing under Mario Cristobal, that was the big thing. There was like, this offense is a check down offense. They don't push the ball down the field. Like, what happens if he has to play in an offense like that? And like, I don't think a lot of people weren't actually sure how great his arm talent was actually until he got to the NFL. They're like, oh my God, he could do this. It's like, well, yeah, people in the NFL circles knew, but like, you didn't see that at Oregon because that's just not how they play. But then he was kind of handcuffed playing on the Lombardi with the Chargers. The Kellen Moore addition will make them more interesting, but with pushing the ball down the field does come more turnovers, does lean on your defense maybe being in less advantageous situations. So how does that affect the rest of the team and how they play? We know Staley's already an aggressive guy when it comes to going for it on fourth down and things of that nature. Like, adding Kellen Moore to that thing might be even more combustible than we realize. Like, he's a more talented play caller, but I think you may be seeing some wacky scores. You may be seeing some games that get away from them early because they're turning the ball over, because they're too aggressive, or they're making too many aggressive calls. You're going to see some games where they may score 50 on people. Like, they're going to be maybe the most interesting team for me to watch in the AFC. But do I think they usurp the Chiefs? That's tough for me to say.
Yeah, it's tough. It's still one of those things where you don't want to put your eggs in that basket. You really don't.
Trust me, I've done it, and it's never worked out for me. It's never worked out for me.
I keep just seeing that. I just keep thinking about if it clicks now, I kind of want to be in on the ground floor, and that's usually a recipe for disaster. But you just look at those Chargers and you say, oh. Just the talent is there, the defense is there, the Herbert is there. It's crazy. So I don't know. I'm torn. I think I would put a sprinkle on it to win the division. The odds are Chiefs minus 180, Chargers plus 300. It's not like a crazy payout, but
yeah.
I think it's possible. And I do think one other thing with the Chiefs is because they won the Super Bowl, and this sounds stupid to say, because they won the Super Bowl, we forgot that it wasn't rainbows and butterflies during the regular season. Like it was more of a grind for them in the regular season than a lot of us remember, just because they did win it all. But we'll have to see if they can do it again, and then we'll move on. Excuse me, we'll move on. But I am a Lamar Jackson stan. Like, I have the blinders on. I'll admit it. Like, I've been clamoring for some wide receiver talent for Lamar Jackson for a long time, and it's not there yet still, but it's better. Yeah. It's better clearly, but like not much. So I have this like faith in the Ravens because of him and because of Gus Edwards, local Staten Island boy, who I know I've met a couple times, great dude. So I'm pulling for him, but the faith is not there because Joe Burrow is him. So it is what it is. But I also just realized, EJ, that I have the wrong mic selected right now. So hopefully I don't sound too terrible, but that's okay. It is what it is. We'll keep pushing. I remember in the beginning I had a reset, and then I didn't click back over. Got
that laptop sound.
That's not it. That's not it. Well, it's good content though. I feel that. I feel good about that. All right, real quick on the Knicks before we get into some other stuff. This is something I heard in the Bill Simmons podcast with Ryan Russillo. They were doing an expansion draft, just kind of like for fun, evergreen content. Let's just have fun with this. Go through every team. Who would they keep? Who would they put up on the board? And obviously the Knicks came into play. So as the host of the Orange Blue Bloods podcast, as a Knicks fan, as a hoop fanatic like you are, as I am myself, I was sitting there listening to this podcast very much questioning what the hell they were doing when it came to protecting the 8 players for the New York Knicks. So I don't want to put you on the spot to name 8 right now.
Okay.
But can you name, just off the top of your head, like the absolute guaranteed protections, even if it's just 4 right now, the absolute guaranteed protections for the New York Knicks in your eyes?
The 4 guys the Knicks will protect automatically would be Brunson, Randall, Mitch, and I think Grimes.
Wow. Okay. So that is partially what I was looking for there, because this goes back to the conversation we had before about the disconnect between local and national. All right. So do you know where I'm going yet?
They did not pick Grimes.
They did not pick Quentin Grimes to protect.
Oh, that's bad.
There's a caveat. So they went with Brunson, Randall, Mitch, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart. Who did I missed somebody that you said before.
RJ.
Oh, RJ, right. RJ Barrett. And they went with, I forget what the number is. No, quickly.
Yeah, I was saying IQ.
And they went Isaiah Hartenstein over Quentin Grimes.
No, that's an omission. That's gotta be.
That's an omission like crazy.
Yeah.
But with the first overall pick of said expansion draft, Ryan Russillo selected Quentin Grimes. So I'm sitting there just confused as all hell. I'm saying, like, we talk all the time about how you can find centers who are between 7 to 14 million who do a job.
Yeah.
And Hartenstein clearly is one of those guys. He does a job.
Right.
He can play. He's a dude. But even amongst DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, I think Knicks fans are sitting here saying, I'd trade DiVincenzo and Josh Hart before I trade Quentin Grimes. I look at him as a cornerstone. Yeah. So are you shocked by this, that a national podcast, and Simmons and Russillo are as locked and loaded on the NBA as anybody who I listen to. So I give them all the credit. I ain't trying to hate. I love both of their shows.
Yeah.
I was just flabbergasted by the Quentin Grimes thing. And then I was like, but then you picked him first. So were you just trying to get him on your team? Like, I'm so confused here. What's up with this?
Yeah, I almost feel like maybe there was some content kind of picks being made. So, like, because, Quentin Grimes is a good pick. So, whatever expansion team you create, you got a good starting piece there. Yeah, that's part of me feels like they forgot, but then part of me feels like, well, if you picked him, then maybe you didn't. Yeah, that is bad, though. I mean, Quentin Grimes was essentially one of the sticking points, apparently, in the Donovan Mitchell negotiation that happened last summer. So I think a lot of people, like, kind of learned who Quentin Grimes was last summer. Like, maybe he wasn't as known around the league, and then people kept hearing, why are the Knicks so hell-bent on keeping Quentin Grimes of all people? And then he played last year, and he was an integral part of the Knicks' successful season. The guy guarded other teams' best players, shot almost 40% from three, averaged double figures last season. He's a young player. He was played to the Rising Stars Challenge. Like, I mean, it's kind of hard to see how they messed that up, because I agree. I mean, Simmons and Russillo, I mean, they know the NBA and they know about these young guys, so it's not like they don't know who Quentin Grimes is. But yeah, I could not disagree with that more. That Hartenstein would be ahead. But I agree, even DiVincenzo and Hart, I would say no. Not because you also got to factor in the money. Like, you got Grimes on a dirt cheap deal. So Hart just got paid today. Now, and they knew he was going to get paid, probably when they recorded this. DiVincenzo just got paid. So those are guys on more expensive deals for longer periods of time. Grimes, you're looking at a guy where you're only got to pay him to 2 years out from now. Like, that's why he was top 4 for me. Like, that was one of the main reasons why I picked him.
Yeah, and it was like one of those weird moments where I'm like, damn, they don't know about Quentin Grimes. Like, that's crazy. Is this one of those things where it's us being New Yorkers again, being too high on our own thing, right? And I was like, no, this guy is legit. Like, he has more playmaking chops than people realize. He can put the ball on the ground. He can drive. He can cut. Obviously, he can shoot and defend. Like, what's going on here? And then they picked him first. I'm like, wait, do I feel good now? Do I feel bad? Like, I don't understand. I didn't know how to feel. So I'm glad that you agreed with me. And the fact that you put him not just in the 8 protected, but you put him number 4, that basically told me everything that I needed to know and make me feel vindicated for bringing this up as a topic at all.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, because I'm thinking about these names, and it was tough because, like, RJ, IQ, like, those are the guys I was thinking of at 4th spot. But I'm like, they can't, given the money and given what he does for their team, like, to me, he's the perfect fit next to Brunson in the starting backcourt, because he can guard the guys Brunson can't guard. He's not a ball-dominant player, so they fit like a glove. So to lose him to an expansion draft, a guy that you're not even paying that much money would be catastrophic. I think that if Leon did that and there's a Las Vegas team next year and we lost Quentin Grimes to the expansion draft, there'd be people picketing in the streets.
Facts. Could not agree more. Nothing else to be said on that notion. I am excited because it always is with this weird time where we're so excited about football. We just spoke about it for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever it's been. And we're football, and boom. Oh my God, we got to do a season preview. Basketball's here.
Yeah, I know. Training camp starts next month. People don't realize it's right around the corner.
Yeah, when with your pod, you obviously go all year, so you've been talking about everything throughout the summer and all that stuff. So all good. All right, quickly, EJ, we're already at an hour, but I want to just touch on a few little things here. Love when we get a fellow radio guy, audio guy, podcaster on the podcast. I love the flow of talking to somebody who also just loves to talk sports and talk shop and all that stuff. So let me just ask you this again: EJ_Stewart on X. I can't say it. Whatever. Yeah. And Orange and Blue Bloods podcast all over your podcast feeds, wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as you hear him on the Fan occasionally, CBS Sports Radio, all that stuff. So I just want to ask you simply, what was a moment for you? What was a time for you where an audio thing, I don't want to just say radio, even though when we were coming up, podcasts weren't really there yet. So when was a thing for you where audio and sports talk television just came into your life and you were like, yep, that's the one?
Oh, wow. It's so tough because I feel like in some ways it's like there are different points in your life where you feel like, at least for me, that's what it was. There was different points in my life where like there was an importance or there was a connection that was made that felt like, wow, that's something I want to contribute to. That's something I want to do. Like it starts very young. Like you talk about audio. Like my parents still have tapes of me as like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old who's doing play-by-play of Knicks games on like an old tape recorder. Because I was just that invested. Like I heard Marv Albert, I heard these guys, calling Knicks games or calling NBA games on TNT and being like, man, like that would be the best job. Like I would love to do that. So my introduction to that on the audio level started super early at like 6-7 years old, and then you get a little older, and then I'm driving around all of New York City with my dad, and he's listening to WFAN. He's listening to Mike and the Mad Dog. He's listening to Joe Beningo. He's listening to Steve Sommers. And, for me, playing basketball as a kid growing up, I'm going to different basketball tournaments, going to different practices, going to different showcases, whatever it may be. And that, in some ways, that along with, hip-hop and Motown with my mom or 90s R&B, like that was the soundtrack for a lot of my childhood. So it was started very early, then started as, I started kind of getting around, getting involved in sports as an athlete. And then when I got to, end of high school, college, I started thinking about what is going to be my life. Since it ain't going to be the NBA. Then you start thinking, what do I want to do? And this is something I always wanted to do, So, doing college radio and wondering, hey, is this something I can do? And being inspired and doing that. And then finally, that is a third prong there, or a fourth prong, I guess, comes from kind of seeing what got created online. Seeing the birth of kind of the digital age and seeing people launching podcasts and YouTube channels. Like I launched my YouTube channel, New Generation Media, with my brothers, and we were inspired by, it wasn't even sports. We were inspired by Collider back in the day. They were doing like reviews of movies and reviews of like different TV shows, and I was like, yo, we literally sit here and talk about movies and TV shows just randomly for an hour anyway. Why not record it, So like the whole audio experience, like it's like it came in multiple ways that got me kind of here in terms of that love, but yeah, it started at a really young age, probably before I could really even formulate a lot of sentences, because I've heard those tapes and they sound kind of crazy.
It's funny that a lot of people who are in the spaces that we are, it was an early thing, right? It really was something that since we were kids, we had this weird interest in that world. Like I remember for me, it wasn't radio right away. I wasn't really that exposed to it when I was younger, but I was like, yo, I want to host SportsCenter. Like that was the thing for me when I was a kid. I was like, SportsCenter host is the coolest job ever. And then it like graduated. Like you said, yours is a couple prongs there. For me as well, it wasn't until high school that I was truly introduced to sports talk radio. I had a carpool with the parents in the neighborhood because I went to a school about 15, 20 minutes away. And one of the dads, had the fan on every morning, and Boomer and Carton are just doing the crazy stuff, and Carton doing the crazy stuff. I'm like, this is a job? Like, what's going on here? And it went from like this SportsCenter, play-by-play thing that I was like obsessed with, sitting there annoying my family, saying, this guy's actually 6 for 7 in his last 2 games, and they're like, shut up, like I don't care, man. Like, I'm just like, sorry, that my brain just like can't stop. Like I still do it. My fiance watching a game with me, she's not even watching. And I'm like, Nikola Jokic when he was, and she's like, she's like, who, that lanky white guy? Like, what's going on? And I just like, you can't turn it off when you have it in your brain. And then hearing Boomer and Carton and then on to a bunch of the ESPN radio shows that I listened to, all that stuff growing up, and then podcasts just like boomed it into this other stratosphere. So I appreciate hearing your story. And another little tidbit, I work at a high school now, and I run a little broadcasting club. These kids now who are in my club, who are doing their own podcast, calling play-by-play for our sports, they still are sitting in their house playing Madden, playing MLB The Show and 2K, announcing their games, watching the Knicks games with the sound off so they can call it themselves. And I got told by multiple students who are 14 years old, 15 years old in high school, and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So I'm happy to hear that. And now just talk to me quick about Orange Blue Bloods, because what a cool thing. You know, you're with one of the biggest Knicks names on Twitter, Tommy Beer. You guys are chopping it up Knicks style as much as possible. What's that podcast been like running through Odyssey? And obviously you spend a lot of time at the station.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, it took a while to kind of figure out what Orange and Blue Bloods was going to be. You know, I had a vision for it, and, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen. There were multiple moments where I didn't know if it was going to happen, and then eventually we got Tommy on board, and Tommy is awesome, by the way. Shout out to Tommy Beer, my co-host, my partner in crime. And we've been doing that pretty much since last December, which is very interesting because we started at a weird time. The Knicks were amongst that early, really terrible losing streak, and it seemed like Tim may be fired any day now. Like, it was a really crazy time to start a Knicks podcast. But kind of see how the conversation has shifted and changed over that course of time has been kind of wild to see. But it's been a blast, you know, like it's crazy because I've never, you know, covered. It was funny, like getting in the Knicks space, and my dad, you know, he's always say, you know, because I've done different sports podcasts, and again, I talk here Marvel's DC heroes, which I know we'll talk about in a second, but like he'd always say, like, you know, you really need to do a Knicks podcast. Like, that's your team. That's the thing you know the most about. Like, why don't you do a Knicks podcast or Knicks content? And for me, I was like, I don't know. Like, there are a lot of talented Knicks content creators. Like, in my opinion, like, I think that in some ways, like, it's kind of been birthed because of some of the discontent maybe with Knicks coverage. But, like, I see some of the people that cover the team now, some of the Knicks content creators that cover the team now, and I'm like, for a long time, I was like, I don't know if, like, my voice is needed. Like, I enjoy just watching them, listening to what they have to say, and then tweeting my little stuff, and then moving on, you know? But, like, whatever it was, something, you know, kind of changed in my mind, and something made me feel like, you know what, like, this is something I gotta try. I gotta see if, like, not that I stack up, but that, like, I could provide something to go along with these other very talented people. And to do it with a partner like Tommy Beer and create some of the stuff we've done so far has been absolutely remarkable. So it's been going on since December. We're still doing episodes even during the summer, as crazy as that may sound. And trust me, it is crazy trying to do a Knicks podcast in August. Thank God Josh Hart signed today. That made that a little easier. But yeah, we're going to keep doing it. We have a whole nother season coming up, and we'll be hitting up all the audio platforms pretty much. Starting in October, you know, we'll be doing 3 times a week. During the summer, we've been doing 2 times a week. So, yeah, we're gonna be keeping it going. But it's been awesome so far.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people in our range often like battle with, right? You're like, all these people are saying all these things already. Like, what else can I say? And I think when outsiders look at the industry and say, oh, like, how hard is your job? You're just talking. Like, yeah, try talking and having something to say. You know, I'm doing this podcast once, twice a week, and there are days where I'm sitting here like, what the hell am I about to talk about on this podcast? And I don't even cover just one team. I do baseball, basketball, football. You know, I go off the rails, which we're about to do in a little bit. And there's times where I'm like, I got to have something to say. I'm not just turning the mic on and saying nothing for 40 minutes. Right. There has to be something. So for you and Tommy to do that all year round, like that's a grind, and that shows kind of your passion of the Knicks and how you can pull out so much stuff. Also the evergreen stuff that you can do, you know, whatever it may be. But yeah, it is interesting to do just a solo team podcast. I've never done that, but it's a different type of battle, and it's something that can grow into a crazy fan base. And you look at like the Knicks film schools of the world and all these Knicks accounts on there, Nick of Time podcast, like these guys are grinding. I'm following them for years. I'm like, that's good stuff. And that's that's the stuff that's not even on mainstream media, right? That's not including MSG and ESPN and yada. So
or even including like SNY and Ian Begley, you know, like
Begley's the best.
he's creating stuff. We just had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Like, it's like there's so much talent and there's so much commentary. Like, again, for me, it was like a weird internal battle where it was just like, again, like, what am I going to bring to the table? Why would anyone listen to me? Even regardless of whether it's, an Odyssey, WFAN podcast, like, who cares? Like, why do I need to do that? But again, in some instances, it just felt like, well, like, this is something I really love, and this is the career path I've chosen. Like, how could I not, if there's an option there, say, why not try to talk Knicks and see what it is? And it was great. Like, I remember being at the Knicks playoff game in it was game 6. Oh no, game 5. The last win of the season against Miami, and and being at the bar, and shout out to Keith McPherson, the WFAN. I'm with him, so he's the guy getting most of the shine. But then somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, you're EJ, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, I'm this time I had not even done that many shows on the Fan, so I was like, "Oh, yeah."
You're like, what, we go to school together or something?
Right, yeah. He's like, "Wait, no, you do." He's like, "Yo, you do Orange and Blue Bloods, right?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I do." And he's like, "Yeah, yo, I listen to it all the time. I listen to it on my way to the game, and like that's the best feeling in the world. Like that was
best.
Like like you got Knicks fans coming to." They paid probably $800 to sit, because we in the under 100 section. So, they paid $800 probably to go to this Knicks game, and that my voice and Tommy's voice, that what we were creating was in their earpods or whatever they were listening to as they're entering Madison Square Garden for the Knicks to play a do or die game 5 at home. Like that, if that doesn't give you chills as a creator or someone who loves this business, I don't know what does.
It's a goddamn beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Love to hear it. Keep pushing on the Orange and Blue Bloods.
Appreciate
absolutely. It. And let's move on, and let's try to make this a little bit quick. I don't want to.
Yeah, I know.
I don't want to ruin your whole night, but the conversation's been flowing here.
Yeah.
But we do got to go off the rails a little bit. EJ Stewart, Pete Kennedy on Subway Sports Talk, and that's a segment I do when I do non-sports stuff. Subway Sports Talk off the rails. It makes sense, I guess. And we talk about stuff that's not sports related. 99% of the time it is Marvel related. I have some music thoughts in the works that I want to do, and perhaps I may have to bring you back for that as well.
Yeah.
But the Marvel stuff is big, and it's something that I almost similarly thought, I watched the new Rockstar's YouTube channel. I mean, that channel is crazy. The deep cuts, the Easter eggs, the theories, I can't do that. Do I want to just be the fan who appreciates it, whatever? But I do like to get my takes off. As you and I sit here with microphones, we like to get our takes off clearly,
there
right?
You go.
So let's get some takes off on the Marvel front. Obviously, the Secret Invasion finale, and for anyone who hasn't watched it yet, I'd say spoiler warning, but, it's the end of the podcast. It is what it is. If you want to leave, get out of here. But the Secret Invasion finale, it fell short. Now, I say the show, 1 through 5, had something. And to end the way it did, put an exclamation point on where we are currently at in Marvel. Do you align with the more widespread disappointment with Marvel currently? Or do you hold on to some of the positives, the big picture, the understanding of, how different it is with 30 hours of Marvel content a year versus the 7 hours of Marvel content a year we had 10 years ago? So, EJ, take the floor. Where are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like I said, I do a weekly podcast on, New Generation Hero Talk, part of New Generation Podcast Network. I do that with my brother, so we talk about this stuff all the time, and it was funny. Those guys, Shamari and Kendall, they had been on Marvel for what they felt like was a slip in the creative for a little while, pretty much since the end of Endgame. They've pretty much been on them saying, this is not what we've been seeing. And I've been the one that's kind of been like, no, it's going to be fine. There's been a lot of stuff happening in this pandemic. We're not kind of getting this stuff the way they plan to give it out to us. And I've given Marvel a lot of rope. I feel like, for me, the Secret Invasion, finale really was kind of like the tipping point where I jumped off the bridge at that point. I mean, to me, what's so disheartening is it just feels like there is some grand plan because they have movies planned out, I guess. But it just feels, some of these shows that they're doing, some of these movies just feel kind of aimless. It just feels like you see the movies that they're deciding to make or the shows they're deciding to make, and then you ask after you watch them, why did they make this thing? Like Eternals. Why was that made? We've gotten no return from anything that was established in that movie. And then the word is maybe we'll see it in the next Captain America movie, but we have to see it to know that. I watched Secret Invasion, I watched the ending, and there were a lot of issues. And I look at that and I say, why did we need to see this? Like, what was the point of it? Like, was it just to get Nick Fury a TV show and give Samuel Jackson a TV show? Because one thing that has concerned me about Marvel and Kevin Feige and the way he kind of visualized things is he's been so hell-bent on saying, we need to do something that we haven't done before. And that kind of driving what kind of projects they do, why they do certain projects, and not what presents the best story. Like, because I don't know how you could do a She-Hulk show that essentially does a parody at the end of how movies and final arcs of superhero shows and movies go, and then you also greenlit Secret Invasion. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. So, like, that is the concern I have with him, where it's like, I don't know if there's any real direction. And, I know James Gunn is on the other side of the street, and, he's somewhat a competitor now, but I keep his quote a couple months ago keeps ringing in my head when he said, I'll tell you one thing, we have this thing planned out way more than the way Marvel does their stuff, and I worked at Marvel. People just thought, oh, that's just him, putting DC over maybe. Based on what I've seen in the last phase, like, this doesn't look very organized. This doesn't look like you have a real game plan. So, I love this stuff. I live and die with this stuff. Again, I talk about content. I talk about this stuff every week. But this is alarming. This is really alarming. And I think they better be careful, because we just had Barbie and Oppenheimer come out, and, they just killed it at the box office. So this idea that the superhero era that we've lived in is going to just last forever, it might not be the case.
So much of what you said, I gotta try to get to here, but I'll stick to.
Sorry, no, I went to a lot, but
no, it was great. It was great, because I also was the guy in the friend group saying, "Nah, listen, like, if Doctor Strange came out when it was supposed to, like, blah blah blah," right. And I think Multiverse of Madness holds up singularly better than people.
I agree. That's actually
remember it.
Besides, I think a lot of people feel like No Way Home was the best, but even that's weird to put in there because that's a Sony movie.
It's like its own thing, right?
Right, but like, to me, like, Doctor Strange is probably, to me, still my favorite phase. I guess 5 we're in, or phase 4 wherever we're in.
Yeah, 5.
That's probably
my 5.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite phase 5 movie.
Better than Guardians.
Yeah, but that's Guardians is good too. I didn't actually think about Guardians.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick little synopsis of how I'm feeling. So, I love Guardians. I loved Wakanda Forever, even because I thought the hand that they were dealt was, like, insane, and, like, that cannot be understated. What they were dealt with everything, with Chadwick and the whole 9, like, it was impossible, and they accomplished, like, an incredible film. I thought Strange holds up by itself, and I thought some of the other stuff was bad. With the shows specifically, I looked at the shows and said, if I can grab on to 1 to 2 things from each show that's going to lead to something better down the road, I'm not going to criticize every nook and cranny of Miss Marvel CGI and, like, the absolutely horrendous villain in Miss Marvel. Like, that was one of the worst villains ever. And Marvel usually don't miss on villains, right? Like, Gore the God Butcher, sick villain, bad movie, it is what it is. Right. But I liked Kamala Khan. She was cool. Right. I'm in, right? Moon Knight had some issues. It was a CGI punch fest at the end. But I thought the whole dual personality, trio personality was dope. I thought Moon Knight was dope. So I grabbed onto Moon Knight and said, when I see him in the movie, I'm going to be hyped. But none of these things are leading to each other yet.
They're not leading to anything, yeah.
Even, like, back to Secret Invasion, the whole thing with Rhodey or Scrody, whatever you want to call him being a Skrull, like, that sucked for everyone. And sometimes in movies, you got to make really hard decisions to kill someone off, to make someone turn heel, because it makes the story more compelling and pushes something forward. The Skrull Rhodey thing, and how they made it seem like he's been a Skrull since Civil War, it doesn't push the story forward. It literally just sucks. Like, it literally just makes everyone upset. That's all it did. And it wasn't one of the sacrifices you made to take, 1 step backward, 2 step forward, to flip that little euphemism there. Because that's what you have to do sometimes. Sometimes you got to get someone killed, and it creates a beautiful, crazy thing. A la Tony Stark, a la some of the other crazy deaths we've seen. Loki, yada, yada. Some of these decisions, we're just not seeing it. And perhaps we're getting clouded by, we're expecting it right now, and they're hyping us to expect it right now, but it's coming in a year and a half, 2.5 years. That's something that needs to be communicated better. Because right now you're bringing the big fans from Marvel to the movie theater and to their TV screens and disappointing them. You're bringing casual fans to the movie theater and to the TV screen, and they're saying, what's going? I don't even know what's happening, right? Yeah. So it's like this really weird catch-22 where they're not appealing to the masses. Because if they were just appealing to the masses, us hardcore fans would go, damn, that kind of sucked, but I get what they did. It's neither. And that's the problem to me. None of these stuff is leading to each other, let alone Gaia and her OP as hell freaking power set now, which is a crazy thing, which leads to new rock stars Eric Voss, who's like a wizard with this stuff. He's like, I think the best way for Marvel to move forward is for Galactus to win and just end it all. Like, he's like, we've reached that point, and that's a problem, and it sucks, but I will still be here watching every 8-minute I Am Groot short. I will still watch Loki, which I do actually have some hopes for because I loved Loki season 1. Love Loki, That almost lives as his own little thing right now. And like, I just now am going into every movie with low expectations, every show with low expectations outside of Loki. But that stinks. But maybe it could help us get back on track. I don't know. That's like my only hope right now is like a shrug.
And it's so unfortunate because the Skrull Rhodey thing. So Secret Invasion the comic is actually like a formative comic for me in my reading. Like, I love reading comics. My dad and my uncle read comics, and I didn't read comics so much as a kid. But then in high school and college, I got back into it. After Civil War, essentially, Marvel Civil War, the comic book kind of got me into reading. And I essentially read all these issues from Civil War till about Dark Reign, or the end of Dark Reign, which is a very great story that I would love for them to ever do in the big screen, but it's going to take a lot because Norman Osborn becoming the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's a lot going on. But Secret Invasion is like that was like the heart of me reading comics and being like, oh snap, like there are people who are Skrulls that are like in all these Marvel comics. We don't know who they are. And it was such a compelling, interesting approach Marvel took, and I loved it. And for years when it came to, will Marvel get the rights to the Skrulls? Will they put the Skrulls in movies? I kept saying, I hope they do, because I want them to do Secret Invasion. So it breaks my heart that so many fans hate this Skrully thing, because in the comics, like, these reveals were awesome. Like, there was nobody who was like, oh, like, Spider-Woman's a Skrull, all this sucks. It was like, oh my god, she's been like with the Avengers this whole time and doing a lot of stuff. Like, this is a big deal. Oh my god, like, Hank Pym just shot Mr. Fantastic in the face. What the hell? He's a Skrull. Like, but the problem was, like, they telegraphed it. They didn't have any other heroes involved, so there was no connection. Like, there's no one who actually works with Rhodey on an intimate level around to even react to him being a Skrull. So, like, there's no benefit to it. There is no weight to it. And it sucks, because I don't hate the concept that he was a Skrull this whole time. I think when we watch Armor Wars and he's going to be like, Tony Stark is dead, crazy. I think that there's a chance that Don Cheadle will have to put on maybe one of his better performances of Rhodey how does he react to something like that? Maybe a Rhodey we've never seen. But they messed it up so much because there were so many other elements to make Secret Invasion work as a comic that they just cut corners on. That it didn't work, and it's so frustrating because this is something I asked for literally for like 10 years, and then here we are saying, man, that's the Secret Invasion finale, and that Skrull reveal that was supposed to be the biggest thing ever, that really didn't hit, and I'm like, I feel like I wasted my time yelling on podcasts that they need to do this thing.
Yeah, and then everyone who doesn't know about it is like, damn, EJ was slipping on that one.
What is this clown talking about? This is awful.
Yeah, and it's a shame that, like, Armor Wars now has to be looked at as, like, this saving grace. Like, if Armor Wars isn't a savior, a home run, then it falls short. And even for Eternals and Quantumania, like, there is a universe where, not to use the word universe, but there's a world where future films or TV shows make Quantumania better, that make Secret Invasion better, that make, I don't know about Thor, but whatever, make some of these other projects better. But now we're relying on, like, lower level stuff to be game changer information bearers to get us back on track. And that's a problem. Like, Armor Wars could be dope. It should be dope. But now it's going to be expected to save Secret Invasion. And that's an expectation that it doesn't deserve. Right? So it's just one of those things where I don't know what's coming first. Like, the timeline of their movie releases or their strategy for said releases, right? Like, Fantastic Four, we're excited, but now we're going into it with little faith. And that's a difficult position to be in, but who knows where we go there. So now we're mostly excited for Deadpool, which isn't technically in there yet. Right. We're excited for if there's ever another Spider-Man. We're excited for Spider-Verse. We're excited for all that stuff, but we're not excited for the main MCU hubs, like Thunderbolts. I think people like the characters within Thunderbolts. People love Florence Pugh. People love Hawkeye. He's supposed to be in there, right? I'm pretty sure Hawkeye is.
Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier, right? People love Bucky Barnes. Right. People love Haley Steinfeld in her Hawkeye role, but that's now gonna be a saving grace to something like that's just putting off way too much. So I don't know. We can probably go on for another hour.
I know. We definitely can.
If we really needed to. So yeah, but I don't know. Any last words on the Marvel stuff? Anything to say? Just close it up. Put a pin in it.
I mean, to me, like I've said it on the pod I do, and I would say it here, like. I would, if I was Disney and I was Bob Iger, who I'm not all that happy with, to be honest, but if I was him, I would say, Kevin Feige, you're on watch. Like we'll see how the rest of this phase goes, and we'll see if maybe we need to make a change. I think Kevin Feige needs, at the very least, someone underneath him. I think one of his biggest mistakes recently has been his almost mandate to not hire people who love Marvel. Like, these shows and these showrunners and the movie directors that he's hiring, multiple of them have said he actually prefers that you don't read comics or that you don't love the canon or you don't watch every Marvel movie. I think that's becoming a detriment because I think you're seeing a lack of creativity in terms of actually using the Marvel universe, and you're seeing them make decisions that don't reflect what the fans want to see. And I'm not saying that you got to just do everything the fans want, but some of this stuff, like a Ralph Boner in WandaVision, which I love WandaVision. That's probably my favorite Marvel TV show. But like Ralph Boner decisions and, who's the astrophysicist? Is it Reed Richards? And it's nobody. Like, those kind of things don't happen if you actually have people who actually know what the conversations are that are happening among fans. And I think that that's the one thing I would change. He needs to start hiring those people who care about this stuff because guess what? Ryan Coogler cares about stuff. He did great stuff. James Gunn cares about this stuff. He did great stuff. Like, the people, even back, I know Whedon's a controversial figure, but his first Avenger movie was excellent. You know what I'm saying? He cares about this stuff. Get back to hiring those kind of folks who actually like this stuff, or at the very least will do the work to, like, learn what this stuff is about, and I think that you'll maybe see a change there. But that would be one of my big things to fix what's going on at Marvel.
Yeah, and I think the James Gunn thing, to wrap it up, is such a good one to bring up, because you cannot deny that he absolutely adores comics, not just Marvel, but all of them. Like, he just loves the culture. He made something that he really cared about and wanted to see through, and it was beautiful. Like, I cried. I cried in that shit. Like, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The Wakanda Forever, I cried in that shit too. Like, come on. Multiple times. Like, there was a level of care handling that stuff rather than trying to make an artsy film, which we loved some of the Marvel projects like Winter Soldier for not being true to true Marvel superhero shit, but like, you get the best of both worlds when you're hiring people who care about both, right? And that might be really hard, but I think James Gunn is not one to blow smoke. And if he's sitting here saying, I think DC now has better strategy, even though, Flash, whatever, we're not going to go there. But if he's saying we're planned out better than Marvel is right now, I don't think he's just going to say that. Like, he cares too much about comics and the culture and these products to just say that. Like, he might be a guy to make crazy jokes. He might say crazy stuff. But he cares about this stuff, and he's not going to just blow smoke. Like, he's in these interviews, they're asking about his top 5 favorite movies. Or favorite comic movies. He's pulling out deep cuts from all, like, he's passionate about it. You need some of that passion. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm excited for some of the content nonetheless, and I will be watching all of
it. Same. I'll still be here watching, but I maybe end up being more disgruntled. I feel like my Knicks fandom that's come much more pleasant to watch and much more has been much more like a fan of and supportive of the content. I think that some of that anger now is shifted to Marvel. Now I feel like almost like a disgruntled Knicks or Mets fan who's just complaining, but then still watching every night.
There you go. All right. Well, EJ Stewart at EJ_Stewart, Orange Blue Up Podcast. New Generations is the YouTube page as well.
Yeah. New Generation Media is NU is how you spell it. New Generation Media is the YouTube channel, and New Generation Podcast Network is the podcast. So check that stuff out there as well. All fun stuff. If you want to hear me not talking Knicks, you want to hear some Star Wars stuff, some Marvel stuff, you can catch that stuff over there.
Absolutely love it. EJ, it's been an absolute pleasure chopping it up with you. Football, basketball, Marvel, radio, life, all of it has been touched. We hit it all, and I appreciate you greatly. So give EJ a follow. Check out his stuff. That's been it. Subway Sports Talk. I'm Pete Kennedy for EJ Stewart. That's all we got. Cheers.